Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Lead in a Collaborative Virtual Environment, hosted by HRDQ-U and presented by James Eicher. My name is Sarah, and I will moderate today's webinar. The webinar will last around 1 hour. If you have any questions, just type them into the question area on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll answer them as we can or after the session by email. Today's webinar is sponsored by HRDQ Consulting. Are you looking for live, interactive training classes delivered right to your learners wherever they are? HRDQ's virtual instructor-led training classes allow your learners to keep the training, teamwork, and communication going, but from a distance. Real-time interaction between instructors and classmates provides a powerful learning experience, the performance improvement and cultural shift you need. Learn more at www.hrdqstore.com/consulting. I'm excited to introduce our presenter today, James Eicher. Jim is the creator of Cognitive Management, which applies research from the cognitive sciences to organization and leadership behavior. Jim held leadership positions at KPMG, Booz Allen Hamilton, Symantec, and IBM, focusing on organizational change management, learning and development, and organization design and implementation. He's been interviewed by Wall Street Journal and The Selling magazine. Jim is the author of the Management Communication Text, Making the Message Clear, and many articles, assessments, and book chapters. He's co-author with the late John Jones and William Bailey of the management assessment, The Matrix Manager Inventory, Leading in a Collaborative Environment, the Neuro-Linguistic Communication Profile, and many more. It's an honor to have you speaking with us today, Jim.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. I'll go on to the next slide here. And of course, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to tune in today. One of the things we'll talk about, as some of you may have been experiencing in the last few weeks or so, more time to do things than you had before, and some of you that are doing a lot of online meetings, regardless of the software and app you're using, Teams, Zoom, Skype, that sort of thing, are probably finding your days might be running a little bit longer. We're going to address and talk about some of those things as we go along today. I do want to give a brief overview before we get into kind of a pulse quiz on what your particular situation is in regard to managing virtually or remotely. But I do want to acknowledge the context that we have, and the focus of this course, which is based on the assessment, is about the behavioral changes you need to make when you're managing remote individuals and managing virtually. The overall context in which this came about was those of you that have been in project management, even if you're in an office, in a regular office setting, you probably manage people virtually. I know that in one of the situations I was in where I was actually doing IT management, I had people in the US, Belarus, India, and Argentina. So, you know, there's a lot of challenges to doing that. And of course, there's also the situation where you are working out of a home office. Some of you have a home office have set up because that's what you've done before. And some of you, this is a brand new experience, and it can go from, I don't really have the infrastructure, stuff's not working here. I seem to have to behave differently, but I don't know what that is. We're gonna go over that. The dog is jumping on my head. Or I'm all alone and I'm used to being around people at work, and boy, I'm not getting up and walking around like I used to. So there's a whole lot of things that go on in this context in general, even before the situation that we're in, but added with that. So we'll speak to those as we go along. And so I just wanted to kind of level set everybody expectations on what we're gonna try to cover in this brief time. So with that, I'm gonna go on to a series of questions on the next slide, and I want you to answer them to yourself, and then Sarah is going to conduct you through a poll afterwards, and we're gonna get in kind of an overall sense of you as a fairly large group that's online today about what your situation is. So a lot of these you may recognize. You know, you're in multiple locations, and let me change management here to interact with, because that's really what we're going to talk about today, is how do you interact with people in multiple locations, different time zones. Some of you have gone from office situations to working remotely, so you know your team members quite well, and you find that that's actually an added benefit when you're working remotely like this. Of course, people that work remotely, use technology a lot of the time, but now all of us may be using it 100% of the time. You work with people that aren't your employees, different functions. You have contractors, vendors, suppliers, all kinds of different people. Who is a boss? Who's your boss? That really depends on the situation. You have team members that wear multiple hats. And now, if you're in a project, when the project is over, you may, for some of you that have worked on IT projects, let's say, or legal projects, you go work on the project and then you may go back to quote unquote your regular day job. So there's a number of situations that lend themselves to thinking about how to work together virtually and remotely, as is the situation that we're in. So with that said, I'll have Sarah start the poll and go from there. Sarah, do you want me to advance to the next slide, or you want me to keep this one up?
You're okay where you're at now. I just launched the poll, so you should be able to see that on your screen now, and we'll give people a couple moments here to submit their answer.
Sounds good.
Great. There we go. And I'm going to share the results now. And you should be able to see those results on your screen.
Okay, will those come up on my screen as well?
Yeah, you should be able to see them on your screen as well. Are you able to view them?
I may be a little technically challenged here. Where should I be seeing them on the screen?
It should pop up, but I can tell you the numbers. So we have 42% that 1 to 3 said yes, 44% 4 to 6 said yes, and 15% said 7 to 10 yes.
Okay. Okay, so we have roughly between 50 and 60% that of the 10 questions apply to. So definitely in the most of you are in this situation that requires virtual remote kind of thinking and behavior and situations that may come up when you manage. So thank you very much, Sarah. And with that, I'm going to jump into the content here. And this this definition here, where I ask you to say 6 or more, is that's definitely, even if it's less than 6, if it can be 4 or 5, and you have a lot of the element, that's enough of the elements that require kind of a different thinking and approach to behaving in terms of virtual behavior and collaboration and working with others. So that gives us a good idea of you in the situation. So let's start to drill down here from your results. So this is kind of a summary generally of the poll and what you've gone over. If your challenges are, and for some of you, the challenges are going to be different. And in this situation, again, if you're used to working virtually, these are going to be challenges anyway. But on top of that, those of you that are not set up, and this is new to, you have additional challenges as well. But there's, you're all over the place, you're in remote locations, different time zones, the face-to-face contact that I talk about, you reporting, and a lot of times too, you need to get things done, but you're not really the person's manager. You don't have any technical hire and firepower, as I say, as far as getting the results or not. And you have to rely on what we're going to talk a little bit later on, your influence and collaboration skills in order to get things done. It's really a lot about building rapport with people in order to get the results that you want. So real quickly here, we'll go over the agenda. Talk about the outcomes, some of the pressures, who cares why this is important. There's 2 sets of competencies I'm going to go over and spend some time on. We're going to talk quite a bit about networks, because when you're de facto, the moment you got the email or however it was communicated to you that you need to sequester yourself essentially and work at home, your network expanded in new and complex ways. So we're going to spend some time about that, what the challenges are and what to do about it. I'm going to have you do a little exercise with that as well. The decision making is different in these situations. and balancing your behavior is important to getting results. So that's what we're going to go over in terms of content as we go through this. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about tone and that sort of thing, and what I think from my personal experience, and it's going to be my personal experience, excuse me, and my personal recommendations on the current situation, what seems to work, and even what seems to work with different, not everybody all over the company, the executives, individual contributors, as we kind of went through this awkward phase of being in an office and all of a sudden not being in an office anymore. So going to give you some tips on that. I think that'll be helpful. Okay, so what we're looking at here is I talked about a sense of competencies, and overall the competencies are going to be in two buckets. One is what I call command and control, and the other one is influence and collaboration. Let me double check myself on that. Yes, indeed, that is correct. It's a good thing I can remember my own stuff. So the other thing too is how to make decisions. It's a little bit different in this situation. As I said, I really want you to think about what I call your role set or your network. Who's in your network, who's important in your network. I mean, you can say everybody's important, but at the end of the day, some people are more important than others, depending on what work you have to get done, and how to optimize the remote interaction. And that's where I'm going to go into some of the personal stories with the current situation that we're in that I think will be helpful. So these are kind of the traditional drivers of working remotely. We've had globalization. There's what I call customer insistence. We used to call customer satisfaction and delight. It's had a bunch of different words over the years. But if you think about it for yourself, we've all gotten kind of in the Amazon state of mind, which is I want to go online, I want to have one click, I want to find out everything I can, everything I want to buy. I want to get it really fast, I want to get it perfect, and I want to get it cheap. So that's basically everybody's mentality in my experience at work about everything. So for good or bad, that's kind of the Amazon state of mind that we've gotten into. And that drives a lot of remote work. And those of you, I'm going to start interspersing some stuff. Those of you that this is new for, if you thought when you were working at home, which a lot, you know, we all like to a certain degree, if it was going to be less stressful, and the days were going to be shorter and it'd be less demanding, you're probably finding out, not so much necessarily. So, because you bring that intensity working remotely, and it actually, in my personal experience, gets intensified. And then the technology has fluctuated over the years. One of the really nice things is the tools like the one that we're using now are way better than they were even a few years ago, and internet speeds and all that kind of thing. So a lot of us are more in a situation where the technology is working, and that's a good thing. And then the one I added at the end here is the unanticipated. And of course, that has to do with coronavirus and the situation we're in globally, which, you know, let's face it, about a month ago, that short, unless you were in a particular area or had particular clients, let's say in Asia or something, it was kind of under the radar still. So the adjustment's been really fast, and that's demanded a lot of changes for us really fast. So what do we want to do with this stuff is in an overall way, and you know, we are, this is in general what's driving this, but we can really see this now. I talk about narrowing margins, but of course, you know, if your business is completely shut down, or as some companies are experiencing, there's a slowdown, obviously, there's going to be, you know, differences in the top line and bottom line, having to do with the two top bars there. In a normal situation, turnover in the job market is normal, but now, of course, we're seeing quite a bit of change in the job market, so that's putting a lot of turmoil in the system and stress in the system. Now, one thing that I will talk about before we even get into the behavioral content, because I want to level set, and hopefully this will help a lot of you out there. When you all go remote like this, the productivity in general will go down, and that your management may not want to hear that. They may not want to acknowledge it. I am fortunate I have a client that's extremely enlightened about that and aware of it and got ahead of it, and created expectations across the company that this would be the case. And that's because there's little things like Some of those 2 and 3 minute hall conversations you had where you made decisions very quickly on the fly are now turning into a half-hour to 1 hour meeting on a Teams calendar, and you multiply that by many, many decisions and many, many projects and other responsibilities, and it's tough to fit in the amount of work you got to in a single day, even if it's a 12 or 14-hour day now, than you did before. So for better or for worse, I'm telling you that's the new normal. Okay, very quickly on this, and we're gonna dive into the model here. So this has a couple of benefits of thinking this way. I think the obvious ones, there's kind of two levels here. For those of you that are, this is new for, there's a lot of really good webinars and seminars out there, and it's sort of like a sponge. Anything you can learn to handle this and make it work for you. And there's kind of more the steady state or traditional benefits for this on that. So obviously you want to improve your management. We're going to talk about influence and persuasion skills. You know, you really have to be deliberate, and those of you that are new to this, you're finding this out. You really have to be deliberate about connectivity with people, both people that you've never met, especially people you've never met, and people that you do know. And there's some things that I think help with that. And you know, collaboration is the key here in terms of a contributor to management behavior, especially when you're working here. Now, globally, you know, if you back up here, you know, what's the larger purpose in terms of your business or your company, if you are a global company, or even if you're not, if you're a national company, is you want to improve your global performance. When you go into a network environment, and this is kind of forcing everybody to do that, whether they're in a strict management hierarchy or not, you will find out that the flatter, leaner, less hierarchical connections that you make, it's almost necessary to make those to make the decisions quickly. Your work will be cross-functional. Very, very important when you work remotely, whether it's in this current situation or just in general. Your purpose, roles, mission, objectives have to be very, very clear, very, very explicit. If there's any guesswork when you're working remotely, you're going to have to redo another meeting or two, and that's going to add extra hours to your day, and then this is what I meant by the diminishing productivity, that is going to slow the results down. The clearer you are and what the expectations are and the roles, the easier it is to make up some of that lost time if you go through. Okay, so two sets of competencies that I talked about. The first one is what I call in the bucket of command and control, and that has to do with the kind of traditional hierarchy. And this has obviously not gone away and is, you know, emphasized more or less in different corporate cultures. And also I've done a lot of cross-cultural global collaboration work. So it can be, you know, different in a country culture as well. You know, individual attitudes and family, you know, is reflected through here. But to talk about it in a more traditional sense of command and control, if you think about it, is first of all, you're an expert at your content area. You have a lot of knowledge. You know, we even have acronyms for people that are very experienced in particular areas. You know, a SME or a subject matter expert. A lot of people, at least in the past, were promoted because they were experts in their content area before the management training and development and education got sophisticated enough where they realized that the skill set for managing people and the skill set for being an expert in your particular area are not necessarily the same, and don't always serve the purpose. But in general, to start out with, it's knowledge of a particular area, and this doesn't matter what kind of worker you are. You know, plumber, electrician, finance person, lawyer, HR. It's your content area. The other thing is that you're accurate. That obviously your information is correct. Very important for making valuable decisions. is to be correct with information that kind of goes with the knowledge of the content. It's been, I would say maybe exploded is the wrong word, but with the vast amounts of data analysis and predictive analytics and computer stuff that we have now and the information that's flowing, it's really not just about correctness of information, but information management is really critical. The third bullet, of course, is optics, what I would call optics, which are very important, both remotely and individually. Again, different cultures and different companies have a different set of optics. You know, in some companies, t-shirt and shorts is okay, and flip-flops. Not so much in other ones. One of the things that you might have noticed or not, and I'll kind of thread this through here, that we found as important when you're doing remote meetings, and my guess is that some of you are comfortable with the camera being on and seeing other people and them seeing you. Some of you are not. Those of you who've been doing for a while, you're going to be more comfortable. Now, if you've noticed here, I'm wearing a shirt. That's good. It's a flannel shirt. I'm not wearing a dress shirt on purpose. One is I don't know if anybody noticed, but usually when you get there's 3 phases. And that is you start out in your business attire and you've showered and shaved and done your makeup and you've made sure the dog is not going to get into the room and that sort of thing. And then the next phase, well, no, sorry, that's the second phase. The first phase is there is no way I'm turning the camera on and they're seeing me here. I don't like the way I look on video. Then the second phase is, okay, well, I'll look businessy. And then the third phase is, okay, I'm in a sweatshirt, I'm in a flannel shirt, I've got a blanket wrapped around me because it's really cold. And the interesting thing about this and why I'm spending the time here, because we're talking about image, is that what we found out in the situation is that you lose the personality and the connectedness and informality when you leave the office. And it's a very, very important part of your relationships with people, which are important in terms of getting the work done. And sometimes you're not even conscious of that. So what we found out in doing this work is that, and you can't do a big bang. It's you kind of get people comfortable with it. Is that the less formal you are on video, the more people feel comfortable and they're getting to know another side of you. They don't even see at work. The project they work on now, the CIO, who's the sponsor, he just wears t-shirts now when he's on video. He doesn't even care if he's with the CEO. We're trying to get all the rest of the executives to just wear t-shirts when they get on camera. So you would be surprised how the informality brings back some of the connectedness that you lose. So I did want to bring that up because for some people it's really important, and that is kind of a tip or a trick on doing that. Okay, going through the rest of the content here. Regulation means you know the rules about what it is that you're doing, whether it's HR, again, finance, engineering, any of that kind of thing. So that wraps out the one set of skills here. The second set is, and I don't want to say it's a polar opposite, it's complementary, but the effect that you have when working remotely or virtually is you really have to look at your influence and collaboration skills when you're working with people. You're not around them. They're not necessarily in a hierarchy with you, and you've got to get them to get stuff done. So you need to empower people, and that means giving them the chance to make their own decisions and have some autonomy in terms of what that they're doing. Everybody's got a different tolerance for uncertainty and taking risks. And when you get out in these dispersed, networked environment, it's a little uncomfortable for people. So you have to assess the amount of risk taking, and also you want to make risks easy to take. There is a management philosophy that's going around for a while now. I think it originally developed somewhat with, if you've heard of agile software development, but a lot of companies are adopting this. And if you've heard the phrase fast failure, which is, instead of hiding your mistakes, we want to know what they are as fast as possible so we can fix them. Made a lot of sense in the beginning with software, because if you've ever worked on a software project and nobody tells you what's not working, And 10 months later, when you've spent 5, 6, 10, $15 million and nothing's working, people get kind of upset. So it's better to talk about what's not working now so you can fix it. So not an easy change for a lot of people, but the idea of fast failure is highly associated with companies that financially do extremely well. Participation, an obvious one here in terms of collaborating with other people. That's in the decision making, the meetings, organizing your virtual meetings, so everybody gets a chance to participate, everybody gets a voice. We don't have enough time to go deeply into how to make a lot of these things work, but very important. People, you know, when they're not interacting and they're virtually, they don't like to be on the camera, they don't like to speak up, and you need to pull them out because you need the information and their experience, and you want them to feel comfortable with working. So that's really critical. And this is all part of developing others' skills and abilities and competencies in the situation. So let us move on to one of the concepts here is that you want to take your command and control and your influence and collaboration skills, and you want to balance them. And this is how the balance works. You have your subject knowledge, but you don't want to be a know-it-all. You want to balance it with empowering other people and maybe imparting some of the knowledge you have so they can learn, grow, and develop. This kind of goes down to the bottom one in terms of that. So if you hoard the knowledge and you hoard the decision making in a virtual environment, it's going to be very, very difficult to get anything done because a lot of people sort of withdraw to begin with. So you want to create a situation where you can pull them out. And the correctness and the risk taking really goes with the fast failure that I was talking about. Is yes, you want. It's not about being incorrect. You need accurate data, just about in anything that you do. However, if people feel like they can't make a mistake, especially when you're working remotely and the communication is very tenuous because you're not in real time with people, working with them, you need to make them feel comfortable with taking risks and being wrong. That's, again, we're talking about the concepts here and can't get into a total deep dive on how to do that. But I'm saying that that's a very critical feature. It needs to be okay. There was one situation I went into, I won't give you a lot of the details, but I traveled halfway around the world to meet with a group of people and tell them, look, if you don't tell us what's not working and what you're failing at, as soon as you're failing, you're going to be fired. Okay. So that was a very clear message on you need to be okay with taking risk. As a matter of fact, your job depends on taking a risk. And if we go through a period of time where everything just sounds rosy, we know that's not the case, and we're not going to be able to make changes that we need to make. That's kind of an extreme example, but sometimes you need to do that. The thing about image and participation is a little bit about what we're doing here. Is you want to balance the optics out with, in a way that people are comfortable interacting, and the more personable you can make it, the better that response is going to be. And then there's rules and regulations, but you know, you need to develop people as well, and they need to learn new things, and they need to get out of that comfort zone of whatever rules that they have and learn new stuff. And again, everybody's got a different tolerance for that. Some people love everything new, and some people don't like anything new. So again, you're going to need to get a pulse on that and try to balance those out as well. So let's take a step back here. These are the competencies I'm talking about, and we're going to do a shift right now. And the shift has to do with the organizational view, and then that's going to lead into how to make decisions in this particular situation. Excuse me for looking away here and there at my notes and grabbing some coffee here as well. I have the cat shut out of the room for now because, you know, I promised Sarah I'd do that. So there we go. All right. So in general, what you've got is very high level here. Is in your traditional organizational environment, you've got the hierarchy, the pyramid, the manager, the staff, up and down the chain of command and the ladder with the command and control. And what it looks like when you move to influence and collaboration skills is you're more of a network or a web, and all of these webs are connected. And we've got a couple of visuals for you to think that through in a short exercise. But as you can see, the nice thing about this is, you know, in a role set, you are the center of your universe. and you're the master of your universe, and actually you need to think about it that way, that you are the pivot point for yourself, and that the pods here on the network are different. I just have some generic lists here in terms of who you should be interacting with and that sort of thing. And it's kind of set up as a traditional manufacturing company, but you get the idea here. The difference is that your decisions, and jumping ahead a little bit, are made not just on getting an order from somebody, but making something specifically happen. And we'll go over that in a little bit more detail in a couple other slides. So if you look at here, so if we go back, here's you, and here's your immediate connections. And then the first sort of wave at this is you've got a series of departments, and you've got a bunch of team members, and you've got suppliers and customers and vendors and friends and relatives and pets and everything else going in your network. And so here's because this is why it sometimes might feel complicated, because you have your network spread across other individuals' networks. And then one of the things that you can have, let's say at a national level or national scope, is, and I've just mapped out here what some of the connections might be to make a particular decision. Is you're on one team and you're connecting with this person, and they're connecting with that person, and it goes over to this person, and then back and forth and that sort of thing. So that's sort of the rhythm and feel about how this is going to work. I've just pulled out a couple of cities, basically East Coast, West Coast in the middle, and then whatever your particular company or organization is. It doesn't mean private, public, it all works the same. Now to make it even more complex, you go global here, and I think I've hit logos and companies from all the continents. But as you can see, those of you that work in this environment, it gets even more complex, where you're working across teams, not even within cities in your own country, but different countries, different languages, different cultures, company cultures on top of country cultures. And so these skills about how do I influence, how do I get somebody to do something that works in South Africa in a different time zone that I need something from. And again, it goes back to those influence and collaboration skills, because when you're in the situation here, just simply telling somebody in Singapore, Brazil, or Dallas what to do is not necessarily the effective way to get anything done when you're all of a sudden in this remote, dispersed environment that we're in. So the summary of this, and I'm going to have you do an exercise for a bit. Just hang on for 1 second here. So if we go back to here, I want you to just take a look at this and absorb it for a second. And you ask yourself, okay, well, Jim, that's great, the influence and competency skills, but how do I make that work? And this is where starting to be left-brained about this, analytical helps quite a bit. Even to the point where I suggest that if this is new to you, you get a sheet of paper out, or Excel spreadsheet, or whatever tools you like to use, and list some of this stuff down. First of all, you need to really be clear about what your role is and what the expectations are for your role and the boundaries of your role. That is, who you need to connect with within your organization and outside of your organization that you need to interact with in order to get whatever performance results and objectives that you're tasked with. There's different words from objectives, deliverables, whatever industry that you're in. You need to understand what the role is and what the connections are to get that done. There is, not only when you get in the situation, and again, a lot of this stuff, if it's new to you, it's not very conscious. You're just sort of feeling these bumps and asking yourself some questions about, well, what do I do here? What something feels different, but exactly what is it? So you have your business processes and your way of doing things, but essentially when you start connecting and networking up with people like that, you need to understand and learn what their processes are, because you know what? They're the center of their universe, and they have stuff to get done the way that you do. And that's where we talk about you need to come to mutually beneficial outcomes or objectives in order for you and the individuals that you're interacting with to get the results that you want. So that's going to really be understanding how they learn and what their handoffs are. So I'm going to give one example. It may not work for all of you, but it's an apologize. It's another software example. But if you put in these large software systems, they all more or less have the same sets of work streams. If you might have heard these terms: procure to pay, order to cash, direct to consumer, and what they are, they're descriptions of work streams for different applications that the software provides. Cutting purchase orders, paying checks, getting your stuff delivered. This is all behind the scenes, as again, going back to when you order something from Amazon. You know, it goes in, it's an order, gets clicked, a SKU is called up, a manufacturer gets contacted, you know, or supplier. All this stuff is done with software, it's automatic. Well, all of these people all over the world own pieces of these processes, but in order for them to work, they all have to connect. So you really need to know the boundaries and the handoffs there. And finally, alluding to here is you really need to think about, and a lot of people, you know, you might have noticed this when you, if this remote environment is new to you, is that your communication could kind of be ad hoc. Your decision making could be ad hoc. You could just kind of go off and get something done, interact with something. Now it needs to be much more planned and much more purposeful. A lot of times because you have to set up a formal meeting and you have a limited amount of time to get things done. So planning your communication is extremely important, and understanding how decisions are made is also extremely important. So we're going to take a little bit of a break and go back to you here. I just want all of you to do this wherever you are. And we're not, you know, at this point, since it's a webinar, non-interactive program, we can't talk about it, but I think it's valuable. People have found it a valuable exercise. So what I want you to do is take out a sheet of paper and draw a diagram where, like the one in the corner down there, and you're in the middle, and then do some spokes out, excuse me, and then and I want this to be a gut exercise. Just draw out gut level, okay, who's in your network on a, you get up in the morning, whenever that is, and some of you it's a lot earlier than you used to know. And then what you do is just list who's in your network. And I don't want it to be just work people, non-work people too, significant others, that kind of thing. So go ahead and do that. Be quiet for a second. And the purpose here is to look at the bottom is, you know, who do you need to interact with to get your work done? But as I say, I want you to expand this a little bit and add non-work people that are important to you, because at the end of the day, you know, your social interactions are actually a part of how you get your work done. Okay, so if you've done that, we're going to go to the next kind of thought exercise here, and I want you to take a minute or so and looking at the network you've drawn up of who's important to interact with to get your work done, and I would say who's also interactive with to maintain that social balance, which I think with the virus sequestering situation we're in and the social distancing, I think listing out who's important to you in terms of keeping your social sanity is very, very important right now. So I would definitely include them on that. And then ask yourself this question: how can I improve influence and collaboration with each of these individuals? So again, you don't have to answer all of that now, but I want you to think about, take this exercise sheet of paper away later and think about, you know, I'll give you a better example, or I think one that's a little more appropriate. You're going to look at that and there might be 6, 7 people down there and you're going, oh my God, I've got to interact with them tomorrow, but I really don't want to. So that's obviously a target area for how you're going to improve the relationship, the collaboration, and the influence with them. And there's probably people on your network there that you are delighted. You could be on Skype with them all day. So think about those kind of differences and what you could do to make them better. And the main thing there is again, how to reach those mutually beneficial outcomes. Okay, a few more things and we're going to wrap up here. Okay, the main transition here, going from traditional hierarchy to a network influence and collaboration situation. And what I tell people, and I've been in consulting most of my life, and one thing you learn as a consultant is when you go in as a consultant, you are not in charge of anything ever. And you can influence people, but you can't compel them to do anything. I can't walk into a client and tell them what to do. I can advise them what to do, but I have no hire and fire authority. I have no hierarchical authority to get things done. So you become really good in influencing collaboration and working towards mutual benefit. So that's just kind of those of you out there that have any friends or relatives or acquaintances that are in a consulting situation, you might want to talk to them about how they do this in order to do a little bit deeper dive on this. But the thing is, in this situation here, even when you're working remotely, you're finding that you can influence, and you may be in a long line of online meetings, and maybe you're not in the top 5 of queue of somebody else's network, but still you have to get things done, and you have to figure out how can I collaborate with them and influence them to get what I need done. Now, the decision-making criteria here is I hope is helpful because it gets a little more explicit about what I'm talking about. So if you in a traditional hierarchy, you've got the principle is maintaining the chain of command. Now, obviously, like those of you that have been in the military, that is a critical part of the job. It's a critical part of meeting your objectives. It's more than critical, it can be life-saving in terms of maintaining the chain of command, to use the military example. The rank or position is important. Again, if you want to look at strictly in a military sense, there is can be, it's loosened when appropriate, but there's generally a strict chain of command in terms of giving and taking orders. You want to maintain the functional area, and that's the traditional functional area that companies are divided into in organizations. Again, engineering, sales, marketing, that sort of thing. And then again, as I alluded to before, the relationship is usually one of some kind of formal rank, president, vice president, director, that sort of thing. Now, in order to get things done in a role set or network, your driving principle is serving the customers and suppliers. And again, if you look at any kind of online shopping, if you even look at finance and credit cards and things now, maintaining the relationship with the customers and suppliers and making decisions about what's needed there is really critical. With that in mind, when and how do you make the decision? Well, it's not based on waiting for somebody in a hierarchy to tell you what to do. It's usually at the point of contact, and whatever that interaction is, that the decision is made. In the olden days, I'm dating myself, if you called the credit card company and had a quote unquote tough question, they had to go, well, let me talk to my supervisor. Now that is not tolerated. If the person on the phone cannot answer the question and solve your problem, there's nobody has tolerance for that anymore. So it's done very little. Information is key. Data is key. It's who has the best information to get the objective met that is the important source here. The function, what function? Who cares about the function? I just want the data and the information. And going full circle here, we're back to, it's not an issue of rank, it's an issue of influence. So climbing the ladders here, we go from one set of competencies to the other in terms of we put this in a step metaphor because going one way or the other is not as simple as I'm maybe making it sound. You're going to do it in increments. Some of it's going to be easier for you than others. Some of you may be able to let go of a particular competency more than others. in order to go from command and control and vice versa. I'm going to speak specifically to it in terms of going from command and control in a hierarchy to influence and collaboration, particularly since a lot of you have had to abruptly go from your quote unquote normal way of interacting in your work to the situation that you're in. And I think if we go to the next chart here, you're going to find that some of these are somewhat familiar. So if you look at the competencies for command and control: knowledge, correctness, image, optics, rules, regulations, and then you're going all the way over to the right here in terms of the empowerment, fast failure, risk taking, you're participating, and what a lot of organizations require now, but is more so if you get in this distributed situation that we're in, is learning new things, and development is a constant. For some of you that have made the switch that weren't used to doing this, like me, I have an infrastructure built. I have the right internet connections, I have the right cameras, I have the right computers, I have the right voice stuff and microphones, I have backups of things. Those of you that whoop, all of a sudden you had to go home, or you found out it's like, gee, I can't connect to work. How do I do that? And yes, there are ways that you can connect to your office infrastructure, but if you don't know well, some of you go and you do web applications and they don't work as well as being in the office. So there's a big learning curve just even in that infrastructure area alone. So you really need to be open to development, as well as all the other decision making and interpersonal things that go along with it here. So when you're going from left to right, some of the things that you may feel, and these aren't good or bad. Actually, what I'm trying to do is level set you so that if you experience these things, they're actually pretty normal. Is that those of us that think that we're valued for our knowledge, going to empower each other means letting go of some control. And that can be a challenge for people. If you're used to being the person that's right and you have an aversion or get very defensive when you're, it's even indicated, even indirectly, that something you've done there's a mistake or you're not correct, what you're going to feel is that fear of mistakes. And one of the things that can lead to is, again, this sort of information hoarding, which is very detrimental to work anyway, but if you're in this distributed virtual environment, it can really be a killer. So you have to, it's very, very important to let go of that. When we talk about image and optics, there's a couple of ways to do this. Think about this. One is, a lot of times if you're really into maintaining a certain self-image and it goes south, and then sometimes what people do is they blame others for the error, and that is not productive. I see a lot less of this than I used to. I think what applies more in this situation in terms of image and optics is that you need to be, as I talked about earlier, more purposefully relaxed in this virtual environment than you might normally be, and that might be a bit uncomfortable. I know that our CIO, going from being not being on camera to being business on camera to like, oh, I'm just going to wear a t-shirt. And if people have a problem with it, that's too bad. I'm up early and late, and if I'm going to step out in the middle of a meeting and grab some coffee from the kitchen, that's the way it goes. But it actually sets a good working tone for people, because we're all under a lot of stress, and the more relaxed you can make it for you and your coworkers, the better. And then what happens with regulation is, and this goes a little bit to not just rules, but what I call the sense of rightness. And if you see things not working around you, you have this tendency to go be a control freak and run in on the white horse and rescue whatever mistake is going on. And And what you need to do then is actually you need to let go of that and start developing other people's skills, because when they like that and they work really well, and you're going to need that there. Hang on here, I don't know what that pop-up is. So kind of to sum things up, some tips here, again, with the time frame that we have for thinking about how do I get from the left to the right on the last screen is, and this is both for yourself and your interactions with other people, is ask yourself in terms of empowerment, you know, what do you have to have happen in order to feel listened to? Because what empowerment is kind of a consultant-y, you know, consultant speak. And what you're really talking about is generally, if people feel listened to, they start to feel empowered, that their point of view matters, and it'll be part of the work going forward. That's very, very powerful in terms of a motivator. Risk taking, you really want to, I always tell people, you really want to find out what people will do and not do, and don't shy away from that. It's not wrong that they'll do or not do something, but the sooner you find out what they call their personal wall or your personal wall is, what you do and not do, the easier it is to go from there and make decisions about what direction you or somebody else will go into. And the other thing too is, if you think somebody will take a risk and you find out later you won't, then what happens is you don't get the work results that you expected you'd get. So it's important to find that out sooner rather than later. Participation, joint priorities, mutually beneficial outcomes or priorities is, again, that's another very high motivator for achieving balance in the situation and being effective in a remote and virtual environment here. If you're both moving towards the same goal that's of value to you personally and professionally, as opposed to opposing goals, you've got a partner then, and not someone that's getting in your way or a roadblock to a success or getting your work done. And what I do for development, one of the first things I ever ask people that work for me on a project or have worked for me in a functional organization is I ask them within the first couple of questions, you know, what excites you? What do you want to do? In an ideal world, you may wave a magic wand, excuse me, and you know, what would you like to do? And then I deconstruct from there. It creates a positive tone. You do find out what emotionally they're invested in, and it's much easier to build a work plan starting from that direction. I found out over the years than going to others. So finally, for that, in summary, I find that these competencies and capabilities for functioning in a virtual situation, to optimize that, is you can plan for change. As I said, planning is extremely important, particularly in the situation that we're in now. You really can't be as casual as you could be and as ad hoc as you could be in a regular work environment. You really want to understand the business processes and optimize what those are, and that goes back to that learning what somebody else does in their role set and in their network in terms of getting their work done. You want to be a broker of multiple choices. Again, you're going to find out, since this is not a command and control environment, that you're going to need to facilitate and empower choice for people. I mentioned several times already mutual benefit, particularly if you're in a straight negotiation situation. And this kind of goes back to Fisher's work on negotiation, is if you get out of opposing positions and going to mutual benefit, your chances of coming up with a successful negotiation are much higher. Learning and improvement, new things. I bet a lot of you have learned more new things in the last few weeks than you thought were possible. And I suggest that you make that a lifestyle in terms of work in general, and particularly if you're going to continue working in this environment. And this, you know, leads to jointly solving problems with other individuals as opposed to on your own, which gets you from more of the command and control set of competencies to the influence and collaboration. So with that, I will turn it back over to Sarah. I think, are there a couple of questions here, Sarah, that we can address?
Yeah, so if you have any questions, just type them into the question area on your GoToWebinar control panel. We have a couple minutes here to get a few in. And we will give people a moment here to type in their questions. Oh, Denise just said, she said thank you, that she had to leave a few minutes early, but this definitely gave her some things to think about.
You're welcome, Denise. Thank you.
We had a question come in from Janan. She's mentioning that as you were talking about productivity earlier, how we can expect for that to decline. She wants to know if you have any tips to increase productivity amongst your team while remote.
Good question. So the ones that pop in my head, it's kind of two sides of the coin. One is that you probably need to sit down and have, I hate to give you another meeting, sit down and really plan out what the group needs to do, the expectations, how they want to be communicated with, what the cadence should be. You need to make all of that stuff very, very explicit. You also need to look at your calendar and say something like, what meetings do we have to have because they're critical to making decisions, and what ones can fall off the calendar? Because you'll find that you don't have to have all of them, and that's part of that deciding what's critical and not critical. So that's sort of from the, let's say, structural side. From the personal side, I would really also work on creating an opportunity, and I'll just throw out, like, we have a daily check-in on our project for 15 minutes where everybody just talks about their life, what's going on, what the weather's like, what's crazy, what's the virus situation in your area, something personal that people that connect to. Our European group, maybe not to be unexpected, one of the very first things they did when we started this a few weeks ago was virtual happy hour. So they all get together for happy hour at 5 o'clock, I think, on Fridays, and just share stories, talk about how the work week went. So it's loosening it's promoting the personal connection, and then really structuring the work and being really clear about your priorities.
Great, and I think we have time here for one more question. We had a question come in that said, are there virtual meeting management competencies that are different than face-to-face meetings? What behaviors are most important?
Good question. So I think actually they're the same, and there's some really, really good books about how to conduct meetings. I can't remember. I have a colleague of mine has written some really good ones. So if you go into all over the books on how to do a meeting at work in terms of, a purpose, to use the old Wilson Learning stuff, purpose, process, outcomes, what do you expect? This is why we're here. This is what we're going to do. This is who owns what after the meeting, looping back and making sure whatever somebody's accountable for gets done. What I find though is people get really sloppy face-to-face and don't do that. So you really have to do that in this virtual environment. You have to be very explicit about what's required, who's accountable for what, following up to make sure it gets done. Again, I'm doing this really fast, but I think you'll get the point. If you go find some good books or articles on what meeting requirements are for a good meeting, and rigorously apply those to this remote environment, I think that will be helpful.
Great. That'll bring us to the end of our session today. So we can just wrap up with a few more things. The foundation of today's webinar was based on the Matrix Manager inventory. If you're interested in learning more about that, make sure to head to www.hrdqstore.com. And you can learn more information about that. You can find our contact information, and you can reach out to our customer service team. They're really lovely over there. And I want to thank you very much, Jim, for such a wonderful session today. It was really, I think you gave a lot of good information that people can really benefit from.
Well, thank you. And again, thanks to everybody that tuned in. I appreciate it, with everybody's schedule and everything kind of being, for lack of a better word, wackier than normal. Again, appreciate the time and hope this was helpful.
Yes, definitely. Times are a lot wackier than normal. And this webinar was sponsored by HRDQ Consulting, a team of highly experienced consultants who can pull your teams together online from remote locations. Learn more at www.hrdqstore.com/consulting. And thank you, Jim, and thank you all for participating in today's webinar.
Thank you.
Happy training.
Thanks, Sarah.